In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4 and DCRadio.gov.
Welcome to Inside Style, DCRadio.gov 96.3 HD4. I am your host, George Worrell. Thank you for tuning in to our show today. I have the pleasure of welcoming Mr. J.R. Clark. J.R.
George.
It's been a long time, my friend.
It has, man. Much too long, you know.
And thank you so much for coming in today. And it's the beginning of spring, and I can't think of a better person to have a chat with.
Well, hey, George, I appreciate the invitation. And you're right, it's spring, and what a great time to reconnect with friends and to sit down with friends. So I'm looking forward to speaking with you today and just catching up and hearing what's going on in your life, man.
You know, well, we know what's going on. We're talking to J.R. Clark today. J.R., we met many years ago, and your persona and the way that you are has never changed. Just that person of inspiration and all of that. And I understand you are Washingtonian. I feel like I'm the only person not from D.C. So
well,
where are you?
I'm from D.C., but you know, George, the funny thing is, man, there's so many folks who've come from other places to be a part of D.C. So I mean, you're my brother. You're a Washingtonian
right,
too.
Yeah,
How
I've been
about
here.
that?
I've actually been in Washington longer than I've been in my home state of New Jersey.
There you go. So you're a D.C. boy. But yeah, as I'm from Washington. I was born in Northeast D.C. at Providence Hospital. Actually, not too far from this studio. But the funny thing is that at the age of 3, I think this is the case for a lot of Washingtonians, or definitely in my case. At the age of 3, I joke in saying this, but I was kidnapped by my parents when they moved just outside of the city in the suburbs.
Okay.
So I did that when I was 3 years old. But I've always gone to school in D.C. And you know, so many cousins, my grandmother, and everyone has been.
Okay.
They were in the Shaw neighborhood, so that's where I went to school.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of my family still resides. Yeah.
What was it like growing up, suburbs, being in D.C., going to school here? Because we always talk about we see change. Yeah. Have you seen that much of a change? How was it like being in D.C. in the outer areas of D.C.?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I'll share 2 points, I guess, with you. One is it allowed for me to be bilingual because I had to, during the day when I was with my grandmother, I had, I was exposed to and surrounded with a much more of an urban environment. So I had to be cool and hang out and be able to, sort of hang out with folks in D.C. In the evenings and weekends, there was a different sort of conversation, different sort of dialogue, if you will, in the suburbs. So that was a part of my growing up, too. It allowed me to, and that level of exposure, I think, was healthy for me. But in terms of change, the city's changed so much. When I was just much younger, the subway was so new to the city. So transportation has allowed the suburbs now to be really be integrated into the city. So you see, there's a great integration, if you will, of the suburbs and the city. But along with that, too, I think the richness of the various cultures. You have, different sorts of ethnicities and folks coming from all over in Northern Virginia, in Maryland, and even within the city. So I'm watching and being a part of that growth, I think, has been enriching for me as well.
When did you decide, is it before college, to think about what your path was for your career? Did you say, hey, as a little boy, I want to be an attorney?
Yeah.
Or really?
Well, I tell you, when I was young, and I attribute this to my parents, and that village, which are my grandmother, uncles and aunts. When I was when I was young, I was a little boy, I heard stories of the Civil Rights Movement. I heard stories of how it was in the South for my grandmother, my great-grandmother, what was occurring there through Jim Crow, through segregation. So as a really young young student, in fact, I said I wanted to be like Thurgood Marshall. I wanted to be Thurgood. I wanted to right the wrongs of the voiceless, help those like my grandmother, my great-grandmother, those who had been wronged. And I thought it was fascinating that Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley and that whole team, how they were able to take the Constitution and use the words of the Constitution to right some of the wrongs here in the nation. So I said, I want to do that kind of thing. But what happened is, George, as I went through elementary school, Holy Redeemer, and then I went to Gonzaga, then I went to Boston College. I'm giving shout outs to all my places. But when I got to law school, what I had come to appreciate and understand is because there was a Thurgood Marshall, I didn't have to necessarily be Thurgood Marshall. Thurgood Marshall and so many others had knocked down so many barriers that I had an opportunity to really explore and see what suited me best. And so I wanted to be an attorney in large part because of Thurgood Marshall. The sort of law that I practice, however, is not necessarily what he did in terms of civil rights law, but he knocking down barriers has allowed me to do what I do now. Let's say that.
And what is that you do?
I'm a public financer. I do infrastructure and municipal finance, which is a fancy way, I guess, of saying I'm a bond lawyer. What I do is I help nonprofits, cities like the district, access cheaper capital for various projects to be done in infrastructures, roads, highways, sewer systems, the airport. I do a lot of work with the airport as their bond and disclosure counsel. I did the stadium. I was bond counsel for National Stadium. So those sorts of projects are projects that I've worked on. Gallery Place, I worked on that project because there was the city actually subsidized that project with something called TIF, tax increment financing, which is just loaning or subsidizing part of that project, Gallery Place.
So when we have people listening, and I'm always targeting our young people, as we know, every time I'm on air, I'm talking about the Marion Barry Summer Youth Program.
Oh, yeah.
And we do 14 to 16. And I want them to think about careers that, maybe not be advertised, or that the ones that you do see that you can do other things within the law.
Yeah. No, there's so many things. I tell you, when I came out of law school, let alone when I went into law school, the areas where one can practice law has expanded so much, and that's in large part due to the internet, to the way we communicate now, to the way that contracts are executed. So with that, with an expanding economy, with an expansion in terms of how folks interact and transportation, so many all the innovations that we experience with each new innovation comes a whole new set of problems, and lawyers are, if nothing else, they're problem solvers. I need issues in order to help you fix them. And that's why people pay me to try to at least think of ways of fixing some of those problems.
What's your decision-making process? And does it evolve? Have you thought about it? Like, does it change? Or do you have a rule for yourself about your decision-making?
My decision-making is, the starting point for me is am I doing the right thing? I try to be a fair broker in terms of evaluating, can I help you? Can I add value to whatever your goal might be? So that's in my decision-making process. Is I try to. I'm human. We make mistakes. We sometimes make not the best judgments because conditions change. But the bottom line, my starting point is how can JR add value? How can I be helpful to you? It's a part of the long-term play. I think the thing that you have to protect, or at least I try to protect, and my parents have taught me this, is my reputation, my word, making sure that my word and that folks can trust who I do and how I can be helpful to others, helping my community. So that's my starting point in most instances.
And it's worked for you so far?
It's worked. It's worked. So far it is. I'm still trying to perfect it. Like I said, the journey, my life's journey, is one where there have been great successes, but there have been moments of challenges. With those challenges or failures, those are learning opportunities. So it's worked for me. I'll say it to you because you're a friend. I think that my greatest, what I like most about myself is that I'm able to lean on and talk to and have healthy exchanges with my friends. It makes me a better person. It helps me in that decision process.
And it's just like, so we've not seen each other, years? Before the pandemic.
It was before the pandemic.
And it's just old school. It's like, hey, what's going on? And you just pick up from the next thing. In your profession, that's your passion. And adding to that passion, your lifestyle. I understand you love art. Let's elaborate a little bit on that, because a lot of times it's career, but you have those things when you're not in the office. What makes you happy? What makes J.R. Clark happy with family, friends, and the things that are around you?
Sure. First of all, I'm fortunate in that I've had a tremendous village, starting with my mom and dad and my sister, and then my grandmother. And so I've had this great village who've always supported my hopes, my dreams, what I want to do in life. And along that pathway, in doing so, I've come to appreciate the various elements of the village, those who are trying to tell our stories. And art, be it through the visual arts, it can be through music, it can be through food. These are expressions of a community of our people. And so being able to appreciate the various elements of the various art that springs from our community, from our journey as a people, from that struggle, that's something that I want to embrace, and that's what has really led me to, as you know, my love of visual arts. I love all arts, but in particular, visual arts is I've been a collector now, and I'm an amateur collector. I buy what I like. I try to get some advice. I think the key for me, at least, and others have told me this, who sort of advised me, is finding works that I like, finding works that perhaps will appreciate. But for me, it's works or art, music, whatever the case may be, things that actually reflect something within our community, and being able to preserve that, capture that, and quite honestly support those who are trying to capture or tell our story is important as well. I love working with or interfacing with or having conversations with young artists, those who are trying to capture the moment, because that allows for the unfiltered picture, a snapshot of a moment to be preserved for generations ahead. They're telling our story. They're capturing our story. So being able to support that, being able to put that on display in my home is something that I really enjoy doing. What
are your thoughts on traveling? Traveling around the country, traveling out of the country. What are your thoughts about that?
I love it. And I tell you, George, as a kid growing up again, and my parents did, they did for me and my sister, what they were used to, and that was just going to see my grandmother. I had a grandmother up in Pennsylvania, so as a young kid, going to Western Pennsylvania was a big deal. Then I remember as a young adult, I got my passport, and I got a chance. Well, even before that, I remember going to New York. I went to undergrad in Boston. That was a big thing for me as an 18-year-old. Then I discovered New York. Then I discovered Atlanta and L.A. and Chicago. And I was like, wow, it was just fascinating. Then as a young adult after law school, I really, spread my wings, and I was in Europe and had a chance to be down in South America and see some of the great cities there, and it's beautiful. I mean, there's so many beautiful cultures and language and perspectives. Travel is something that I think that we should all try to do as much as we can, and you don't have to necessarily fly to go over to Europe all the time. And there are great stories to be told and people to appreciate here. But if you get a chance to see other parts of the world, I love doing it. And I take my kids when I can to other parts of the world and just let them explore and see and meet folks as well. I think it's a wonderful. It's perhaps the best sort of education they can get.
How much time and effort do you give in what you wear and what you purchase? Clothing.
Probably not as much now as I used to, and I'll tell you why. And this is really, I'm probably stealing one of your lines. Is it starts from within, and I think. I'm at a point in life now where I have, still on the journey, but I have a greater appreciation of what I like, who I am, who I am, and I say what I like, who I am, and that sort of thing. So, as a younger person, you try to keep up with the styles, what you see. You say, oh, that they're wearing this, that the haircuts like that. Don't have the same kind of hair I used to, but the haircuts like that, or you had to wear those jeans. Had to spend that kind of money.
Slave to the.
The marketing and that sort of thing. And I think as I have become more comfortable in the understanding of who I am and what I like, I know what I like now, and I know where my comfort spot is. Now, it's important not to sort of wear the same old blue suit, white shirt, and red tie every day. You won't get too comfortable. You still want to, explore a bit and try something a little different here and there. But I know what I don't like.
Well, that's the most important thing, because we always say that you should know more about what you're purchasing about your style, about yourself, than the person selling it to you.
Yeah.
And once you figure that out, the battle is over, because then you can have a uniform. And I'm also a great champion of that you should dress for your office, meaning throughout my career, my styling has been for politicals and corporate. So I wasn't the stars or the artist, singers and things like that. Mine was more corporate political. So my way of thinking was always, you should, whatever you're doing, it should be for the office, not for yourself. For yourself is when you're off. And you should be a chameleon. So, do you think about those things about your clients? Like, so if you have a client, you have something like, okay, this is what I need to wear for this, or do I need to wear something different as a male? Because many times people think that women only have that problem.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it's universal about what you're going to wear.
It is. I'm at a law firm. And there is at least, and I've been practicing for a while now, about 30 years, but I've been with this particular law firm for 21 years. And, there was a uniform. There has been a uniform in terms of the dark suit, the white shirt and tie. So that's part of. And
was that a written uniform, or just like a uniform that everybody just kind of knew, and when you came in, you just conformed to it?
No, I think that I used to work with Congressman Stokes, Louis Stokes. And he told me this, and I think it's right. When people pay you a certain amount of money, they expect a certain look. I think it's pretty true. People, when you pay a certain amount of money, they have an idea what a lawyer should look like. So you have to meet that expectation. I can't show up. I may know it. I can't undermine the substance by distracting them with a look. I can't show up in jeans and a sport coat. I don't care how fly or the sport coat is. They're expecting the uniform in that environment, right? But I do pay attention to that because they're I do a fair amount of work, have done a fair amount of work in New York. It's a different clientele in certain instances. When I'm doing my bond work, my infrastructure and public finance work, it really is that IBM look, right? Okay. But in some other instances, I have good friends and I hang out with and try to chase some business out in Los Angeles. Okay. It's a different look, a different feel in that environment. I do a fair amount of fundraising. I interface with a number of folks on the Hill. In local politics as well. So there's a different look depending on those things. A lot of times, the starting point for me is the uniform, if you will. But I expand from that depending upon who the audience might be, who I'm going to be around. You want to be cognizant of that. I think as you get older, too, and you get comfortable, you can judge and assess what works and doesn't work. And as people get to know you.
Yeah, so doesn't the script flips a little bit? Because if you're doing something for a long period of time and you've built up, they're coming to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so this is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, so it's,
and so there's, and I tell young people that, and I'm like, am I so old now? But I tell young people that too. When you're starting out, you're establishing your reputation, you're establishing your brand. Once your brand is developed, you don't want to leave that because obviously you feel comfortable with whatever that brand is that you've developed. But it allows for flexibility is allowed as people get to know you. They come to trust you and appreciate what you bring to the table. So it does flip to some extent because, a lot of occasions now, and I know we're post-COVID, so there is a greater flexibility, but I don't always wear a tie. Or I will wear that sport coat and jeans because folks have come to trust, I think at least, they'll tell me I'm wrong tomorrow. I think they come to trust that what I'm conveying to them in terms of substance
is more important.
Than right?
What, if your tie is.
They know J.R. They know that what I'm bringing forward is going to help contribute to fixing the problem, and so I can be a little more comfortable.
It's. I think I told this story, I'm not sure if I told it on the air, but I was speaking at an event for Dr. Board, who is now the CEO of Unity Healthcare. And I'm the person who advises other people about what should be in your closet. So I'm going through my closet, and I noticed that I can't button any of my shirts at the top because I was going to wear a tie. Like none.
Right.
Like none of my shirts.
Right.
And I have a lot of shirts.
Right.
And it was like, so I had to go without a tie. So, you know, when I got up to speak, I noticed that out of maybe the 70 people, maybe 40 or 50 of them were men.
Right.
3 of them only had ties.
Right.
And I told that story, and people came up to me at the end. It was like, yeah, that's why I didn't have a, you know. So, but I just think that COVID, like you said, has changed everything.
Yes.
I think it's relaxed a lot of things, but I think it's gotten a little bit too relaxed because I went to church on Easter Sunday.
Right.
And some of the things that I saw were definitely not before COVID in dress. And I'm still a starch person about protocol and where you're at and what you should do and what you should have. And a chameleon, you know, you have different looks for different places.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I do. I agree with that. I think there's certain standards that you have to respect. And perhaps that's my grandmother speaking through me. But I think there's something about that. I mean, I always have my kids, you know, when you go to church, you still have to wear a suit. You know, this past Easter, I had, you know, my very youngest son, he had to have a sport coat on.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he had a sport coat on. He wore a hat. He had suspenders on. And he likes that. And, you know, he enjoys looking good, you know, wearing that sort of attire in on those moments. So I think there's appropriate wear. It sort of follows as well. When I was a kid, with my grandmother in the Shaw neighborhood, we had to call everyone Mr. or Miss.
Oh, still.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah.
I'm 60, and it's Ms. Elsie or Miss...
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't change. And
doesn't.
So, you know, that's going to be a show, too, when we're talking about manners and all those kinds of things. Because what it is, it sets you apart. And it's something, especially culturally, that we were raised with. And, you know, being well-bred has nothing to do with money. It has to do with manners.
I agree.
You know, as we wind down, I want to ask you, what is an underrated tool that's indispensable for your job?
Being able to write. I'll say this. I say it to young, in particular, African American law students. You have to be able to write. We as a people, we as black people, we can talk. We can out-talk anybody. I'm not a litigator.
Okay.
Most lawyers don't litigate. So I tell young folk, black and white, and everything in between, that it's important to be able to express yourself through the written form. The tool of my trade, the tool of this trade, being an attorney, is the ability to be able to express yourself through the written form, being able to write. And you'll never get to a point where you don't need to focus on that any longer. You know, I still need to work on my craft or my ability to write or express myself through the written form. So being able to write is the indispensable tool for what I do.
It's so funny because I was watching something and the mayor was saying, she was speaking to school kids, and she said there were 3 things that you must master: speaking, writing, and being able to convince people of something that you need done or to sell. Those 3 things. You're gonna have to know, like, if you get that loan, you know what I mean? Like, or you are starting your new business and you go in front of the banker, you're going to have to be able to write, you're going to have to be able to talk and be able to sell that before you walk out. And that's just in life, don't you think?
It is. You have to be able to persuade me, convince me that whatever you want me to do, whatever you're trying to persuade me to believe, you have to be able to convince me. I'll listen to you, but once that conversation ends, I'm going to need to be able to see it on written form on paper, because you won't be there. I need to be able to revisit, consider, and, you know, reflect on the different arguments or assertions that you may have made. But I need to be able to see that in written form. You know, whether it's and that's just life. Okay. That's just life. That's been my life. Sure.
You know, what's the last good book you read besides mine?
That was the last great book I read.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm working my way through 1619 right now. So that's actually, it's just a fascinating read. Bearing the Cross, Taylor Branch's Bearing the Cross about King. I'm reading that for the second time.
Okay.
And I'm picking up on, it's a great story, a great narrative as to the humanity of those who set the table, who set the table for us. You know, all the great figures, all the great leaders of the civil rights movement, being able to get behind the curtain in their stories, understanding their humanity, understanding their challenges, understanding their self-doubt. But nonetheless, though, they persevere, they march forward. And so being able to take a look behind that curtain to see who they were and what they did for us, it gives me hope. It gives me self-confidence as I, continue on my journey, understanding that they too, with all the greatness that they did, they were human with each of those steps. So that's a wonderful book that I definitely encourage folks to read, along with your great book as well.
Thank you. Plug. Right? But no, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in today and talking to us. Social media, you're on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook. You can get me at, was it J.R. Clark?
Yeah.
You can, so J.R. Clark is there. Instagram at J.R. Clark 1966 if you want to get me there.
Ah, perfect. Well,
Yeah.
perfect. Well, we're going to have you back to have a longer conversation. Thank you again, my friend.
Thank you.
We've been talking to J.R. Clark. Thank you for coming on, J.R. Thank you for tuning into Inside Style, DC Radio 96.3 HD4. I am George Worrell, and remember, real style starts with being comfortable in your own skin.
In DC, for DC. DC Radio, 96.3 HD4, and DCRadio.gov.